Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Hello, friends, and thanks for listening. I just wanted to take a second to give you a quick reminder about subscribing to the show. If you have not already, just take a moment and do so. This will make sure that you never miss a daily bite or an upcoming episode. And in addition to that, if you have a few extra moments and like to drop us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And there's also a sponsor of the show located at the bottom of all of our episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being badass. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the BAM with Lori and Jenny. Today, I am just really fucking excited about our guest, Amanda, because she goes above and beyond to empower women to really explore intimacy, relationships, and self-discovery. And I feel that it is so important. And she is just an amazing woman. She's going to share her journey of becoming a mom and figuring out her next steps in her professional career. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating to have her on the show and listen to her journey. Now, Amanda has a very unique profession, and I mean, we all do it. We all talk about it, but sometimes we all feel a little nervous. Anyways, I'll let her tell you what that is. But Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here with you both.
Yay. So Amanda, I talk about this profession. Why don't you go ahead and tell people what your quote unquote title is and kind of take us down the path of how you ended up doing what you do?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I'm Amanda Testa, and I'm a sex and relationship coach. And people always are very curious, like, wow, what led you to get into that line of work? And I think for many, it's from my own personal journey, because I can recall when I had first had my daughter. She's now almost 12. And I, of course, loved being a mom. But as anyone knows, when you step into motherhood, it's this huge initiation. And I had little idea of what I was in for. And I just remember I was, doing everything I thought I needed to be doing for myself. I was taking care of myself. I was working out. I actually was a personal trainer and taught stroller strides. I don't know if you ever see those moms in the park.
Yes.
Strollers.
Yes.
Yes, which I loved because I had that community aspect. And, I just thought I was doing all these things, but I just remember when she was around a year old and just waking up so just exhausted and resentful in the morning. And I wasn't diagnosed with postpartum depression. So I just couldn't figure out what was going on. From the outside, I think many of us can do a really good job of just like playing along, like everything's going great. But I just remember this one morning going to the bathroom and, tripping over toys as I go, just like, I'm the only one that ever does anything around here. And I got to the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I had zero recollection and connection with the person looking back at me. And I was like, this cannot be my life. I do not know what is going on. Like, I have checked all the boxes. Everything should be great, but I am just miserable inside. And so I just decided I would just start following the breadcrumbs to find myself again. And
at the time?
Pardon me?
How old was she at the time?
She was just a little over a year old.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started
coming out of the fog by then, right? So then you're like, what the hell is going on? Yeah.
Yes. And so I started, just finding things, and I ended up, working with a coach, and then I was open to whatever came across my path. And I remember seeing this online ad for this to improve things in the bedroom. And I thought, well, that sure couldn't hurt, because anyone with small children knows how that goes. I was like, sure, let me give this a whirl. And I remember being so mortified when I signed up for it. I was mortified. I was like, I cannot let anyone know I'm doing this. This is so embarrassing. I should know how to do these things. Like, this should not be such a big deal. But I just remember feeling so much embarrassment when I first signed up. But then after doing it, I was immediately, like in the first few weeks, noticed such a change in myself, because really it was more about connecting with your own self and your own desires and your own body. And it was just incredible to me because, I've done a lot of work in my years, and before I had my daughter, I was in corporate sales and marketing and training for 10 years, so I have a lot of experience with, working with myself and people. And I thought, oh, this is something I've got. But then I realized I really didn't have that connection with my own sexuality ever. And I was raised in a very Southern Baptist small town in Georgia. And so people are always like, and how did you end up here? But it's because of so many changes and just feeling so much better in my body and just how everything opened up for me to be able to ask for what I want and needed in the bedroom and beyond and connect with my husband and really open my heart to him in ways I never had.
So I have a question. I got to interrupt there. So did you tell your husband that you were going to take this course? Was it a course that you took? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
It was. I don't remember if I told him at first, but then I had to make time for it, right? So I told him that I was going to be doing these practices, and of course he was all about it. He was like, "Sure, whatever you need."
If this benefits you and me, you go for it, right?
Yeah. And then he started noticing what a difference it made in me. So he was like, "I'll put the kid to bed tonight. You just go do your thing." And I just started feeling so much more energy in my body. I used to need like 3 cups of coffee to get through the day. And then I was just starting to find that in myself. And really, after learning all these things, I was like, why are women never taught this? Like, I just want to scream this from the mountaintops. So
I feel like there's like a giant blockage in all of us.
Yeah.
Like men, women, everything, just like energy. Like everything is just stifled. Yeah. And so I wonder, like beyond the sex piece, like how did it just free you to just express yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think because it's very connected, our voice and our pelvic floor, that's very connected. And I think when you start to, first of all, kind of just know what you even want, because when I first started, I couldn't even tell you. If someone had given me $1 million and a day off, I'd have been like staring into space blindly. Like, I don't even know what I want.
Right.
Right. And so it was kind of like taking that time to be like, what is it that you want? What do you need to feel like yourself? What do you need to put yourself in the equation? Because I was very good at taking care of everyone else's needs.
Yeah.
And really went all type A into parenting full force. I didn't go back to my corporate job, which I always assumed I would go back, but I couldn't. And I was grateful that it worked out that I could stay home with her. But then I was like, type Aing the momhood, never taking any time for myself, like not even going to the bathroom when I needed to. So that even those little things of like pausing and being like, what is it that I need? Maybe I should drink some water. Maybe I should go to the bathroom.
Maybe I should eat, right? Yeah. No, I love that you make a really good point, and Jenny brought it up too, is it goes beyond just the sexual side of things. It goes beyond really finding out what you want, right? Like what empowers you, what makes you feel good, not just in the bedroom, but outside too. Like what is, or are those things? So I'm curious. So after doing all this, like it was a course. So it wasn't necessarily giving you a certification, right? This was something you were just taking for you. So then at what point was there the little light bulb that went off that said, hey, I want to help other women be able to enjoy this kind of freedom, if we call it that?
Yeah. Well, I think because of my own experience and just being like, I want to scream this from the mountaintops. And at the time I was teaching stroller strides and hearing all the struggles from the other moms, and really realizing this is something that lights me up. I've always been interested in this. I've always had a fascination about connection and, how humans interact. It was part of my major in college with speech communications, which is a lot around like just how do we connect with each other? And so and at the time there wasn't a lot out there to learn. So I read probably 100 books. And then my teacher started a certification. So I did, that was the original certification I did. It was a 650-hour sex and relationship coaching certification that was really focusing on, how do you learn, teach these tools to others, right? Because it's a lot around learning your body, understanding your anatomy, learning how to work with your sexual energy, which is a really powerful force. And most of us have never learned how to tap into it, but it's a learned skill, right? And then also all the things that are wrapped up in it. Because typically, like you say, sexuality is one of the things. Like the sex is the one thing, but there's so many more layers typically on top of it, just about maybe you've never really taken care of yourself, or maybe you've always had shame around sexuality, or maybe, you're really good at giving but not receiving. A lot of these things that a lot of my clients deal with are just going through big transitions after becoming a mom, or after, moving into perimenopause, or maybe moving on after a divorce or whatever, like really kind of coming back to what do you need?
Or being present, right? I think
Totally.
that's the hardest part about for females and for myself is we have a list a mile long in our brains, right? Like everything we need to do, things we should be doing. Like, how do we disconnect that and just be present in the moment? Because that is probably the hardest part, I think, for a lot of couples is really like shutting your brain off and being with your partner in that time, because we're all experiencing different stressors, different, emotions. And I think that that's a challenge that I'm sure you spoke with a lot of women, especially after becoming moms, right? Like sex is way different before children than it is after.
Well, and I would add one of the things that you kind of gave me an aha moment, and we don't listen to our bodies in such simple ways. Like, I don't have time to grab a glass of water. I don't have time to run to the bathroom before this next meeting. And I saw that. I'm in HR. I was in corporate America, and I would see back-to-back meetings, no time for lunch, no time for a walk, no time for a bathroom. And I will tell you, this broke my heart. So my daughter came home, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. They started tracking them going to the bathroom. They can only go to the bathroom 3 times a day. They have to put in a request on an app. They're monitored. They can only be in there.
What is this for?
At school. It's an app. And I said to her, you go whenever the fuck you want to. And if they have a problem, they can call me. Because that is telling all of us, do not listen to your body. Just do what you're supposed to do. Don't listen to your body. And I also have an issue with, like, you don't put a blanket policy on everybody for a few troublemakers, right? So anyway, so we had this whole conversation, but I'm like, I feel like there should be lawsuits around this. This is a problem. So we're being told, do not listen to your basic needs.
I mean, Jenny, I cannot even tell you how fired up that makes me, because a similar thing happened to my daughter's school. And I went in there and I stormed into the principal's office. I was like, this is ridiculous. My daughter's going to go to the bathroom when she wants.
Yes.
And you cannot, like, the same thing. It's not exactly, that's how we learn, right? That is exactly when it starts, when we don't listen to our needs, when we can't, like, oh, you can only drink water here, or you can only go to the bathroom 3 times a day and you have to put it in on an app. It's crazy. And that's kind of where it starts. But if you think about a lifetime of those little micro learnings, no wonder we don't tune in.
Yeah.
Right? And it's also in our culture, it's very praised to just work, be a workaholic and achieve and right.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's I guess in my mind, what is the purpose? Is it's the productivity of the kids, is making sure that they're,
They put it under the guise of safety, which, I mean, schools have an issue with safety right now. We all have an issue with safety. So I get that component. I honestly don't believe it. I think that, it's probably mayhem, and these poor teachers are trying to corral these kids. I understand all of those things. I don't think this is the solution. And I don't know if it was discussed at, admittedly, I didn't go to any like school board meetings or anything like that. I don't know how this was discussed or how this was decided upon. But when I saw the email, and she told me first, and I was livid. And I was like, that's not going to be followed. Like, you're going to do what you need to do.
Yes. And I think this is an important thing too, just for moms and parents. Like, when we take the initiative to not like let some of these things that it's hard sometimes to stand up.
Mm-hmm.
But this is how things change, right? We have to be brave and like do the hard thing to make change. It's not easy. So, I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing is like when we learn to better care for ourselves, we can help our kids better care for themselves, just like you were saying, Jenny.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so how has this impacted, like, we'll get into like your husband and all that stuff, but I want to know how this has helped you with your daughter. Like, how has this helped you educate her?
Yeah, I think this is really huge because, again, I had the really horrible experience of my mom taught 6th grade when I was in elementary school, and we went to this Episcopalian school, and she had the unfortunate job of teaching us sex ed in 6th grade.
That's right. Oh, 6th grade.
And you can just know how embarrassing that was because, first of all, we were very religious, super, we didn't talk about those things. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure my mom would have gladly talked to me, but I just had a lot of shame. I don't know where, probably just from my environment around it. And I remember even when I started my period, I didn't even tell my mom. I just would like sneak things out of her closet.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that such a weird feeling? I mean, I go back to like 5th grade, and I started my period in 5th grade, and like you go out of your way as a 5th grade girl to like hide having to like take care of that part, right? And you're hiding stuff in your jacket, you're figuring out how to go to the bathroom, where it shouldn't be a shame. Like, this is a natural part of what happens, right? But there is so much embarrassment, I think, that goes along with starting your period, right?
Yeah, I didn't tell my mom either. And I swore, I was like, my kids will tell me. Guess what? My oldest daughter didn't tell me either. My youngest did. It's so funny how they're different. But yeah, I mean, it's, again, to your point, like all these little things we just like suppress or ignore.
Mhm. But I think even when they're little, and I'm lucky that I started doing a lot of this work when she was little, but it's never too late to open conversations. But
Yeah.
even, anyone with a small child knows they're like your little buddy and they never leave your side. So I used to jokingly call her my bathroom concierge because she never would always wants to be right there. And so even when I was on my, if I was on my period, I would explain to her like, this is natural and this will happen when you are older and then you're going to start, bleeding every month and it's nothing to be afraid of. And so then she would literally pass me the tampons and she's like, what color one do you need today? Or, the jokes like the bathroom concierge, but just kind of eliminating, shame around it and not being ashamed to, let her see me naked or learn the actual parts of your body, and I remember this is a story that I think a lot of people can resonate with because I know I was back home visiting visiting a friend back in Georgia. And I remember her kids were young and I was giving Mimi a bath and, I was telling her, to wash her vulva. And my friend's like, oh, I hate that word. And I was like, what do you call your son's genitals? She's like, penis. I was like, what do you call your daughter's genitals? She's like, down there. I was like, well, when we don't even learn the proper words for our anatomy, no wonder there's shame around it, right? We're like, ooh, that's so bad. It doesn't even have a name. Right. It's like an elbow. And just like letting them know it's your elbow, it's your vulva, it's your nose, it's your clitoris, it's your whatever, right?
Yeah. I think it's the meaning we put behind it. Like this, again, the shame that we've carried.
Yeah. And I think the toughest part too, I have a 6-year-old and he is very curious about, we recently got a little puppy, which is so much fun. But his questions were like, how is she going to have babies at some point, really going down that path. And, he's even said it before, asking and, I raise my hand and say, I don't know how to necessarily answer the question of how do babies happen and why do they need, a part of you talk about shame. It's like, well, if I go down the path and explain this to my child, am I the mom that he'd go, because of course he's 6, he's going to go tell his friends everything, right? Are you then the mom that's like, what are you telling your children? So it's like a balance, but that's just society has really, created this shame of educating your kids about being a human. Right.
Well, so we had sex ed too, and it was lacking for sure. But we had sex ed. It was called human and family relations or something like that. And
we can't even call it sex ed. See, we can't
call it sex ed. We did, but the school didn't, probably because the parents were horrified. And my parents were not at all religious, but did not talk. And honestly, my dad probably talked more about periods and stuff than my mom. He had this, there was an administrative assistant that he worked with, and he'd come home and be like, well, Helen says that you're going to start going. And I was like, I don't want to hear any of that, but he tried. Right. But now they don't have school, sex ed at my daughter's school either. And I was shocked, but they've dropped it from the curriculum.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there's, most states, there's a very small percentage of states that require sex ed and that it actually be medically or scientifically accurate. So it's really hard. And I think there is more than ever now the need to educate about sex and about your body and about, consent and about understanding how to avoid pregnancy and all these things. Because I think a lot of people are afraid that if they talk about it, then they'll be more likely to have sex. But actually, the more they understand, statistics show they're very less likely to be sexually active at a younger age, the more they understand and know, which I think is really encouraging.
And assaulted too.
Yes.
If you don't know the name of something and your daughter is 5 and being abused and she doesn't know the proper name for where she's being touched, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting that you say that because it's almost like a need that we need to have this, education, call it body education or whatever it is, even at a younger age, like at 1st grade, 2nd grade, where it doesn't have to be as in depth per se, but it can be very learning the parts, learning, the anatomy, learning the differences. I mean, obviously at 6 and 7, boys and girls know they're different, but they don't really know why they're different. I mean, some have a good idea, some have no idea. So it would be great to see it implemented if they could even earlier, just in a more basic fashion of anatomy.
I know. I wish I'd met you 15 years ago.
I know.
Well, I will say there are some great books. I'm pretty sure the author's name is Corey Silverberg, but he has a bunch of great books like How Babies Are Made and Sex is a Funny Word. And then there's also It's Not the Stork series. But I think also just having books around, because even though my daughter, it cracks me up because she's like, oh, you have such a weird job. And it's embarrassing. I was like, one day you'll appreciate it. And I'm sure you'll come to me with questions one day. But they sometimes do, and I feel like even just the other day, there's things that come up or things they hear at school. And I feel glad that she'll come and ask me about it. I hope it continues, but you never know. But I think just the more you can just like normalize the conversation. It's not like a one and done thing, but just if they have questions, just answer them as you can, and just be like, if you don't know, you can just say, wow, you know what? I want to answer this question for you, but give me a minute to research it and I'll come back to you.
I love that.
Yeah, or like right now, I'd love to talk to you about this, but I'm kind of busy, but I definitely want to make sure we make time to talk about this. And then like have a scheduled time so you can get your thoughts together.
And I love that. Yeah. Because we all are, well, I know I've been so caught off guard when anything has come up. And it doesn't even have to be about sex, but just like, even like, is Santa real? I was like, oh, holy shit. Like, what do I do? And sometimes just taking that breather to just like calm yourself, get your thoughts together, figure out how you're going to tackle it, give them your full attention is huge.
Yeah. So Amanda, I have a question. So when you decided you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm all in, this is the path I'm going down. Were you at this point, like you said, shouting from a mountaintop, like telling people, like coming out of, the forest and being like, hey, this is what I do? Or were you still a little bit like, do I tell my friend Susie Jo what I do? Is she going to think something different of me? Like, was that a weird like transition for you, or did it just kind of happen naturally?
I think, at first it was hard. And I think that, but I was just so passionate about it that it became easier, and then also just talking to my mom and just telling her, I'm just going to be posting these things on social media and I have a podcast, so don't listen to it and don't follow me on Instagram,
Yeah. How do your parents take it? I'm dying to know that.
Yeah. Well, my dad, he's dead. He died in 2008, but it's funny because he, Southern gentleman, but one of his friends recently private messaged me on Facebook and he was like, you know what? I know your dad would be so proud of what you're up to. He might not understand, but he would be so proud. And I think people really appreciate it. My mom and her friends, they love it. They're like, oh, I wish I had you, 50 years ago.
Love that.
Yeah.
So do you have siblings?
I have a younger sister. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question. So we were just talking about this over the weekend. And it was, so I was with a group of girls. It was a birthday dinner. And one of the women said, yeah, my husband says on average, women have sex, or people have sex once a week. Couples have sex once a week. And I was like, I hate when guys say that, because my husband he's actually really pretty good. But once in a while, he'll be like, yeah, it actually was probably earlier in our marriage. But yeah, so they have sex all the time. And I'm like, I talk to their wives and they don't. So if he's having sex once a week, it's not with his wife. So what do you like? What's your opinion on what's normal, what's average, what all the things?
Should there be a number, or is it good to set a goal? Like, I mean, I think, like Jenny says, is a perception more so on one side or the other, or, I mean.
Mm-hmm. So this is a great question. And I always love to address this because I think that number is it's like a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
Like, what's the number? How many times do we have to sex? Yeah. And it's like, whatever is right for you and your relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And I think those are the conversations that you can have, like, what are your needs? And a lot of times it's, you might enjoy it, but you're just too busy, or maybe you just don't enjoy it. And so you might want to improve the sex that's on offer, right? Because there's a lot of aspects at play. And so I think it's really feeling in for you. What's realistic? Like, what would feel good? And maybe, you might not always have time for like a great romantic evening where you can like connect and talk and bond. And maybe you mix in the different,
You're talking to moms on this podcast, Amanda. They don't have time.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just like, and I think that's the thing, is just realizing what I've found that I think is so changed our relationship is it's more of like the micro connections, making more time for micro connections throughout the day, so that when there is a spare moment, you're more inspired and you actually want to connect with your partner versus like,
a chore.
Yes, yeah. That is like spot on, and that's something that, I've brought up to my husband before too, is, there's the day is a very long day, right? And the act of sex is what it is, but it's like, it's those little things throughout the day that build that then when it is time, it makes a huge difference. And I don't know if you found this for women. I think we need that more, and guys need that less. They're okay without those hugs and those kisses and those just, brushes up against them or whatever. They're like, fine, they're good all day and they're there for the moment. But it's like finding out what we need to empower us later on so that we're just as excited as they always are.
Yes. And it's true because some people need emotional connection before they can have physical connection. And some people, the physical connection yields the emotional connection.
Yeah.
And usually in relationships, there's two different ones, right? And it's kind of frustrating because the one who needs the emotional connection, often, not always, but a lot of times it's the women. And then they are more apt to be like, well, I'll just go ahead because I know like then everybody's going to be in a better mood. And
Yeah.
then again, it's not like because they want to, it's because it's like, oh, I'm just checking this thing off the list and I haven't in a while, so I feel like I should, those kind of things.
There's even I think there's even a sex tracker on Apple, on your iPhone now. And I'm like, oh my God. But it's funny because my husband is actually more affectionate than I am. And I've just never been a very touchy person.
You're the dude in the relationship, Jenny. Come on. Is that what
I
you're
know.
saying?
I mean, he's more like nurturing than me, and he's more touchy than I am. And like when I'm doing something, I'm hyper focused. So I'm like, but I'm doing this. Don't hug me. Like, which I love that he's doing it, but I'm very like almost compartmentalized. So I have to put that time aside to do that, or else I get like annoyed, which, it does sound like the dude in the relationship, like what you would classically think of the dude in the relationship.
Yeah. And I think it is because we are very productivity driven. And sometimes we're like, I need to do this. I'm washing the dishes. Do not touch me right now. Yeah. But I think one of the things is that can happen too over long-term relationships, no matter what, is like if there's little attempts at connection that get shut down a lot, then the person giving them will be maybe more afraid that they'll get rejected. So they don't do it as much. And so it's even knowing like when you know how you are and you know what's like, how, like you say, like, I don't really love that. I'm not very affectionate, but maybe there's other ways that you like to receive love or give love.
Yeah.
And, just kind of figuring out what that is for each other so that you can, approach your partner in a way, they're going to like it.
Yeah.
Right. You might like words, right? Like words of kindness or words of appreciation or, just those things where it doesn't have to be the touching. It can literally be just the checking in or the, I love you and how is your day? Like all that stuff, it all builds up into like showing that you want to have that connection, although you may be disconnected throughout the day.
And that's, I think is, and well, the love languages, you're kind of getting into love languages, but I think that is actually a great way to like understand what you need and what they need.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. It's so true. And I think even too, like taking some time, like what are the things, even asking yourself that question, what are the things that my partner does that make me feel loved? What are the things that they do that make me feel appreciated? What do I love when they do?
Yeah.
And maybe just remembering those things. And then when they do those things, you can just really appreciate that. Like just remembering, oh gosh, I really love when you do that. I love so much when you take out the trash and clean up the kitchen.
Right. Mine's acts of service. I'm like, if you clean the house, I'm like, this is awesome. Thank you.
Let's go.
And then also let them know. And so you can communicate with each other and let each other know. Like it can be kind of a fun thing to just ponder and then talk about.
So you bring that up and I actually just have a flashback. So years and years ago, and we haven't done it and I would love to do it again, is I got this book and it was like a love diary. And I don't know if you've seen it, but every day it had like questions, random questions that you were supposed to ask each other before you went to bed or whenever it was. And we did this, years ago, and it was for like a year. It was like the 365-day love diary. And I loved it so much because even though some of the questions were somewhat cheesy or whatever, it like sparked just a little bit of connection that you would write down and say and just, review and look back at later. And I just thought that was such an amazing way to kind of have a connection that brought you together after a long day.
I agree. And it can be fun to do even, I think this time of year, any time of year is great when you can just be like, what is our like relationship vision? We talk about our goals for everything else, but what are the goals for our relationship? And making sure that you put that on the burner. It doesn't have to be in the front burner, but it's just on the burner with everything else, right? Because we often are so busy thinking about all these other things that we don't often prioritize our relationships because it's easy. It's like easy to do and easy not to do. Like those little micro connections. And I think something that I've noticed is when we get really busy and my husband travels a ton for work, is that we are just like two ships passing in the night, or we can feel like roommates. Yeah. And so when I notice that happening, we're both like, okay, we feel disconnected. So I'll just make little gestures to, we both do that to try to connect. Like in the morning, instead of jumping out of the bed and going about the day, I'll actually like reach over and like touch him or something before I get out of the bed.
Right.
And
Say
then,
good morning, right?
Yeah.
Give him a kiss.
I mean,
Right.
it's funny, like even those little things like fall by the wayside, right? And, I remember watching, was it like Mary Tyler Moore or something? And he would come home and they would kiss every time he walked in the door. And I remember one of my best friends growing up, and it was kind of like they were teasing, they were joking about this show, but he would come home and he'd say, "Hi, honey, I'm home." And they would kiss. And I thought it was so sweet. And I was like, I'm going to do that when because I just thought it was a nice moment of connection. And we're like running around, right? And I know my vision for my relationship. And I'm like, I see us like having fun together into old age. But have I told him that, or have we talked about it? Is that his vision? Like,
Right.
I think that's such a great point.
Yeah. It's communication, right? I think when you're in a relationship for years and years and years, that's one of the things that starts to go is, like Jenny said, you kind of have your vision of where your relationship is going and what it's going to look like. And your partner has theirs, but you don't actually really talk about it. So then those little things like waking up and kissing each other in the morning or, saying good morning, like those just kind of fall by the wayside because you just are in your own two different worlds with your own visions of what it's going to be like instead of like what it is in this very moment. Right.
So Amanda, how long, I want to hear your relationship story with your husband. So how long have you been married? How did you meet? All that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So we first met in 2008.
Okay.
And we got married in 2010. And so we've been together for 13, 14 years now. And we first met, it was funny because I remember, at the time I was really into triathlons. I was a super athlete. And I had been in a bike crash. And so my bike coach was like, "Hey, I've got some great chiros at my office. You should come in." And funnily enough, who do I end up seeing but my husband? And it was but at that point, of course, he was just my chiropractor and acupuncturist. And I was like, he's very friendly. I wonder if he's this friendly with everyone. And so then he like immediately referred me out to someone else because he was like, I that's probably not a good idea to work with this person. And then like it was, 4 months later, because he was trying to give enough time. He's like, "I've never had a patient. This could be really bad. I don't know." But there was definitely like a connection between us. And I remember at that time, I was not really interested in dating anyone. I was just having fun. I was not like looking for a serious relationship because I just gotten out of one. And, but then like 4 months later, he asked me out and I was like, "Oh yes." And then from our first date on, we were like together. And we just have the best time. And I think because we do, he also was married before. So he, has a lot of skills that he's learned and he taught me a lot. And I think too, just the importance of really putting your relationship as a priority, which is not easy, right? And there's been times, and I think the other thing to notice is I want to just really normalize that there's seasons in relationships.
Totally.
There's seasons. Yes. And when you have small children, that's a season. It's more like a winter. But the thing is that, we go through these, but, but the other seasons come too.
Yeah.
And so it's normal if you're feeling like you're in a winter, that's normal. But if it feels like the winter's gone on forever and ever and you want some support, sometimes you do need help because it can be hard to change. And I think even for me, I thought that I had my heart open and I realized through this work that it was not. I mean, it was about 40% open.
Yeah.
And because there's just a lot of fear and vulnerability in relationship, right? And really letting yourself fully love someone and like go there is scary for a lot of people. Yeah, and also it can, yeah. And it can be really easy to get a lot of your needs met too from your kids. We get a lot of like hugs and attention and a lot of needs met from our kids, like emotionally. So sometimes that can be hard for our partners if they aren't the primary parent to be, not as needed or wanted and they don't get that same kind of connection. And so sometimes it's even just letting them know, like, I appreciate you and I value our relationship. And I know we're busy right now, but I miss you. Yeah. Well, let's connect soon. And even that can be like when it feels hard or if you feel like you haven't connected in a while, just even saying that, like I miss you and I value our relationship and I want to feel more connected. And 9 times out of 10, your partner will be like, "Me too."
So Amanda, I have a question. I assume, do you just meet with women or do you actually have male clients that come to you? I'm curious.
So mostly I work with women and couples. I don't work with men as much. I mean, partly is because I don't know. I guess I just am drawn to it to really help women and then oftentimes couples as well. But I don't typically work with men as much. because I will tell you, because when you're in this industry and you're marketing yourself online, and the men that there can be a lot of sketchy people and a lot of unsolicited things come your way. And so part of it too is just the safety thing for myself is like, not all men are like that. There's so many wonderful men, but I have a lot of great colleagues that work specifically with men, but I like to do it in concert with a relationship. Typically when I work with men is where I work with the woman, I work with the man, and as a heterosexual couple, and we'll spend time with each individually and together. Really, and I think the thing to think about too, when I'm working with couples in a relationship, it's really valuing the relationship too as a separate entity, because it is, and then kind of getting everybody on the same page. And honestly, sometimes people are afraid to reach out because they're like, I don't know, is there anything even here, or is it worth it? And
they're nervous and they're scared, right? Just like
Yeah.
you were. I mean, I'm sure I can only imagine how many women you've had reach out to you and then ghost you because they feel embarrassed, or they are like, ooh, I don't know, like I need this, but I'm not sure. And that's just weird. Like I'm like, like I can just see that. It's like anything, like with anybody that's searching for some kind of coaching or, being in the fitness industry, people that are wanting to change their lifestyle, like they get embarrassed, where it's like, you shouldn't be embarrassed. Like, this is you, this is your body, this is your life. Like, but it's the embarrassment factor that's just so real.
I think it's interesting too, because I could see people reaching out and then being like terrified to know, like, if you go in and it doesn't work, right? Like, what if it's too far gone? Then you have confirmation that it's not fixable. Like, I wonder if there's a component of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I feel like most of the clients that come to me, most of the time they have a pretty, good relationship. That's just the area that's missing.
Okay.
And so I feel like when things are, sometimes it's kind of helpful for everyone to know their truth. And honestly, it can be really hard, but 9 times out of 10, people end up happier on the other side. But there have been occasional couples that come to me, and then we have like a very conscious uncoupling through the process. And at the other side, they're both a lot happier because neither one of them were getting their needs met and they weren't happy. But there's many steps between that. And sometimes, I think relationships can serve lots of different functions. And so it's kind of understanding, like, what are the needs that are most important to you? And are you getting those met? And if not, what can you do to get those met? And, what are the deal breakers? What are the ones that you're willing to be, negotiate about? I think there's so many options, right? Yeah. A lot of times people are afraid, but then when they start to realize, like, well, there's so many ways we can make this work if we want to. And if we both decide we don't, then we can get support there too. But, but again, 9 times out of 10, I think people want to feel connected in their relationship. They just don't know how sometimes, right? Or they want to be more present, but it's just hard. And so it's really kind of the practice of sensuality, which I love to say, because even just coming back to the present moment and like noticing your 5 senses. Really, that's all sensuality is, because people, a lot of times we get, by biology as moms, get disconnected from that because there is so much sensory overload. There's always noise and someone touching you, and it's just like, oh God, but when you can kind of remember, wait, I can enjoy some of these for myself.
I remember when the kids are really little, and you're just like, you're their source of food. You change them, you hold them, and my husband was an equal partner. Like, he was doing the work too, but you're still breastfeeding. Like, the breastfeeding thing for me was tough, right? Especially we now know I'm not a huge touchy person. So I felt like I was being touched all the time. That was really hard for me. It was really draining. So I was like, I don't want any extra.
Yeah. And I think in those instances too, it's like, that's when that communication piece is so helpful, to be like, look, I'm not going to be the one that's going to be motivated to prioritize romance or connection. You're going to have to do that right now, because my focus is keeping this baby alive, or, taking care of small kids without anyone getting run over by a car today, whatever it is. Right. Yeah. And I remember too, like, after I breastfed my daughter for a long time, and I remember my breasts were so numb. Like, I could like jab them with my fingernails or pinch them and I felt nothing. And I was like, wow, that's pretty sad. But eventually, the sensation comes back. Like, if you want it to, you can get it back, and it's amazingly pleasurable now. But that happens, right? It happens because we couldn't stand a little baby clawing at us and biting us. If we had full feeling, we would never want to nurse, right?
Right. Well, and to that point, like, your body goes through, just like your relationship has seasons, your body does too. So then what you need and what you want changes significantly over time, and what feels good, when you're 20, doesn't feel good when you're 50 or whatever. So how do you, what do you see with couples or with women in that?
I think that's so huge to know. And what we were talking about earlier too, about, just like wanting to feel good in your body, because body image is a big thing when it comes to sex, like not feeling good in your body or feeling like things change, and they will. And I think that's the important thing of, just really bringing compassion to yourself. Mm-hmm. And whatever you need to do to come back to a compassionate view, it sometimes takes time. It's hard, right? It's not always easy. But when we can view ourselves with more compassion, we can have more forgiveness for ourselves. We can have more patience. We can kind of prioritize what we want more than like what things look like on the outside, because it is hard. And I think when we go through these transitions too, like you say, our bodies change, what feels good changes. So what I really encourage women to do is to, get up and close and personal with your own body, which I get can be hard, especially if you haven't had a good relationship with it, which, that was my experience too. I suffered from eating disorders for many years, but just learning to appreciate what you have and what it's capable of. I honestly think that's one of the things that helped with my body image issues, was just learning how to work with my body and learn what turned me on, and to work with my sexual energy and really what it's capable of, and like the pleasure potential that is here that I never even knew how to tap into. Yeah. And that's the other thing I love teaching women, because once they learn, then they're like, golly, like, why did I not know this? And then it makes you feel better, because it changes and you can feel more able to express that and communicate that, right? Because especially as we age, and even going through perimenopause, and on the other side of that, there's a lot of different changes in our body, and the vaginal tissue can thin and it can be drier, and all these things. But the more you can, I feel like anything, right? You use it, you don't lose it. And so like you're like anything, right?
And I'm glad you touched on the hormones and the menopause and stuff, because I think, Jenny has done a couple episodes about, going through that transition. And, I feel like even at 43, I'm starting that long, call it long process, but, you start to notice the differences, and, there's that hormonal factor that is huge, and, not just like sexually, but like just emotionally. And it just impacts, like you said, like it's a whole new relearning your body, and it's scary and it's weird, and you're just trying to figure it out. And once again, that's something that I don't think guys really can relate to, right? They can't relate to that big of a drastic hormonal change.
I think you said something interesting though, that I would love to just reiterate the fact, and you've said this, Amanda, a few times, like, it's a constant learning process. It's like everything's a season. And so if we just have the mindset of like continuing to learn and being open, and I love that you said you followed the breadcrumbs to this. And I mean, I just think that you can follow the breadcrumbs to the next phase of your life, to the next phase of your relationship, and just being open and curious and exploring, I think, could help significantly, instead of being like, well, this has always worked, right? Like, this is the way it's supposed to be, and this has always worked, and maybe it doesn't anymore.
And I think that's really true around sex as well, because it's always different. Our bodies are always different. And maybe you enjoyed something last week, but this week you're like, don't touch me like that again, or how, that does not feel good. But you don't want to say it like that, right? It's like just kind of understanding of like, this is what would feel really good. This is what I need. And oftentimes too, as we age, we just need more time to feel in our bodies. We need more time to like just drop in and feel turned on. And, often, like you say, when we're busy moms, we don't give ourselves that time. But I think if you, the more you can have that connection going, and the more you can just kind of be compassionate with yourself and do things that feel good, then you're kind of humming along more often at like a 20 or 30. So it might be easier to go from 30 to 60, right? But when you're like totally depleted and you're like at a dead stop, and your partner comes around, you're like, it's not happening, right? So you doing the things that like make you feel good and make your body feel good, that those little micro things add up. So I'm a big fan of like the mini micro things.
I am too. It's so much easier to do that and then just build on it, start from scratch. So
I like that. And one other thing, I have a question too, and I think we can all relate as busy moms, and, days are really busy. Like, I think the hardest challenge too is we're just fucking tired at night, right? Like, we are tired. And if you're like sleep or sex, you're like, which way do I go? Like
Yes.
how do you figure out like
Mhm.
what are those key tips so that you're not exhausted? I mean, but the days are busy, right? So, and you have kids, so the mornings are a little bit tapped on being able to do that in the morning. Like, I just feel like as we get older and we're so tired, that is like one of the biggest challenges.
And the
Right.
kids are
Yeah.
always there, right? And the
Mhm.
kids are always there. And so then I thought it would get easier as the kids got older. And now I'm like, now they just know exactly what we're doing. Back to your point on shame, right? Like, who cares? Like, we've been married for 25 years almost. But yeah, so all of those things are real obstacles that get in the way. Just like any fitness program, diet program, you always have those things that get in the way. And those are the things that get in the way.
Yeah. And I think, and the shame piece is big, and that can take some just taking a look at,
Mhm.
right? I think when you can kind of realize, like, if you just could give yourself 20 minutes and write a letter from your shame, what are all the things it would say?
Yeah.
And how can you look at that and like, well, I can't have sex when my kids are home because then they're going to hear, and then that's embarrassing. Or it's like, and they one day are going to be in a relationship and they need to know, or that you would hope that they're having a fulfilling
Yeah.
sex life, a fulfilling connected relationship. And that's part of it. If, that's really part of it. And so I think normalizing it as much as possible. And then, again, everything to the age comfort level of the, age appropriate conversations. But I think even just letting your kids know, like, we're going to hang out every Friday night. We're going to be hanging out or whatever, or we're going to go take a nap. It's Saturday. We're tired. You guys watch Peppa Pig. We're going to take a nap. That's my favorite. I love the weekends because I feel like the weeks are busy. And honestly, I'm very lucky because my husband and I both work from home. So there's a lot more opportunities for us to connect during the day. We love during the day because, again, the nights don't work. They just do
Yeah.
not. And so I think it's just understanding too, like if there's a time of day that's just never going to work, trying to force it in is going to just feel really bad. So
You
it's
stress
maybe,
yourself
yeah.
out.
And even just kind of noticing even around your body, like, when does my body feel the best during the day?
Yeah.
And is
Yeah.
there ever an opportunity that we could find some time then? I always love, switching out with the neighbors. And I think that's a great thing to take advantage of. It's like Saturday morning, this week you're taking the kids, next week we're taking them. So you guys can have some alone time. And again, that's normalizing, right? Normalizing and de-shaming alone time and having sex with your partner, because I think it can be more fun. And then it can be a fun joke between you and your neighbors.
Yeah.
I like
Or,
that. That's
just
awesome.
it's often getting creative about how you can make little pockets of time. And honestly, I think what I help a lot of women do is really looking at their schedule and like, what are you saying yes to that's really not a yes?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot there. And
Yeah.
there's a lot there. And it sometimes is, it's not as hard as you think. I just want to say it's not, sometimes it can feel really hard, but, and also again, honoring the seasons. Some weeks are harder, some days are harder. But when there is an opportunity, you're like, oh, there might be a pocket of time here. Let's just make a time to connect. That doesn't mean you have to have sex, but just like, let's just make sure we have time to connect every week or every couple days or however it feels good to you.
But it makes it more fun too, right? Where if, your husband is away working and they can put in scheduling an appointment with their wife, if possible, is just as important as scheduling an appointment with their coworkers, right? Like fitting it in. It doesn't have to be consistent, but hey, once a month, if you can make that happen and you can come home for an actual lunch break, hey,
Yes.
that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like, but, and it also as their partner makes you feel special, like, wow, I'm important too.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Absolutely.
I think
Lori,
the lunch dates are super fun if you can make that happen, because typically the kids are at school. And
Well, right. Then you're
I
not
know.
limited, right? On, a time.
Nooner is a term for a reason, right?
yes.
Those
Yeah.
tired moms, they're like, we need a nooner instead.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. Seriously. Wow. I mean, so many interesting things. And I hope that everybody that's listening really has hopefully found that voice in them and realized that they shouldn't be ashamed. They shouldn't be nervous. If something's not working, figure it out or reach out to somebody such as yourself that can help them, because
Yeah.
I think someone like you is so inspiring to know that we're all really the same. We just need to figure out our own individual needs and our relationship needs. But, one last question that I want to ask, and Jenny might have one too, is, what are you most excited for, right? It sounds like, you're excited. You get to deal with so many amazing women on a day-to-day and couples. What excites you? It doesn't have to be career. It could be life. It could be anything, I'm just curious.
Well, I love nature. I always get excited to be able to go in nature because it really rejuvenates me. And one of the things that's kind of a tenet of my work is just that rejuvenation piece. Like we have that ability. Nature is so regenerative and we have that within us. And so anytime I feel stuck or anytime I feel overwhelmed, I can just like go outside and like watch a bird, or luckily we live in Colorado, so there's many beautiful places to go, but that kind of really nourishes me. And I get so excited because I feel like that's one of the things that can help to like connect the dots when women are feeling really disconnected, or like, how could I ever thrive? I'm feeling so depleted. It's like, well, you can and you will. And sometimes it feels hard, but there is the other side, right? And I think too, when it comes to feeling good in your sexuality, it's just an overall part of our health and wellness, right? Our sexual wellness is part of our overall health and wellness. And so if any part of you is struggling, then there's, it's worth checking it out if it's important to you. And if it's not, that's fine too. But if it is something that you want to improve, then you can. Most of it is learned. And I just want to say that too. Most of it is learned.
Yes. Okay. And I think that that's so key, because you feel like you should know it all. Why don't we know this? We've owned this. We've been in this body for however many years. Why don't we know all this stuff? So yeah, again, like that learning mindset. And I think that's one of the things that Lori and I love so much about just having this show is every single guest has talked about how much they've learned and how like something that they did early on has totally shifted and changed. And so it's just been so eye-opening. So my last question, and it's actually more because I want to connect as many women to you as possible. I think the work you're doing is awesome. I'm so grateful you came on the show and you've just been a joy. How do people find you? And we will share all that information in like the show notes and stuff, but what's the best way to get contacted with you?
Yeah, so you can find me. My website is Amanda Testa, Testa. And I also have a podcast called Find Your Feminine Fire, where I talk about a lot of these things, which sometimes that can be like an easy first step in, right? When it feels like I can just listen to a podcast, I can do that.
Yeah.
And then I also have a lot of different fun free gifts. If you go to amandatesta.com/thegoods, like the THEGOODS. And then that's where I have all kinds of fun things, like you can get in the mood meditation, or a sensuality activation, or all that kind of fun stuff.
Well, that's awesome.
For free. Yes.
Perfect. We will share all of it, but we're so grateful. Thank you. This was awesome.
Yes. Thank you, Amanda. And, we look forward to connecting with you again in the future. And I hope so many women that are listening reach out if they're having any kind of, just, I don't want to say embarrassment, but just any kind of, thoughts that they could improve themselves and their relationships. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you both so much too.
Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep being you and keep being badass.